It's hard to believe that we are already basically at the halfway point for the NFL season. But here we are as we enter week 8, and the Denver Broncos are set to take on the Carolina Panthers at home in this rematch of Super Bowl 50. But before we get into this game preview video, I want to thank the affiliate partner for today's video, Green Gridiron Helmets. Use code DENSYN, DENSYN, link in the description down below to save off your first purchase. They have anything from full-blown NFL replica helmets just like this one, full-sized, to little desk trinkets. Really cool stuff they have over there. Again, that's code DENSYN to save on your first purchase. Thank you so much to Green Gridiron, and now back to your regularly scheduled programming. The Denver Broncos are coming off of a 33-10 victory last week on Thursday Night Football over the New Orleans Saints, improving their record to 4-3. The Broncos in that game against New Orleans were able to dominate at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. They rushed for over 200 yards. Javonte Williams looked fantastic in that game. Jaleel McLaughlin also looked good. They utilized Bo Nix on the ground. We were able to see Bo Nix go for 75 yards on the ground. He was able to utilize his legs on designed runs, on read options. He did struggle a little bit through the air. Well, not just a little bit. He struggled quite a bit through the air, but they settled him down, got him comfortable on some easy reads, some RPOs where he could get his feet set and not have happy feet back there. One read, get the ball out quickly, if not, hand it off. And the Broncos found some success offensively doing that, pairing that with their standard run game. And defensively, they were going against Spencer Rattler, making his second start of his NFL career, and Rattler really struggled against this Broncos team. Without Pat Surtain, they did drop back and play a lot more zone coverage. We didn't see as many man coverage, straight-up blitzes that we've seen in these first few weeks. We just didn't really see the Broncos have as much aggressiveness in that game against New Orleans, but it was to their benefit because they were still able to get home with a 4-man rush, not really having to blitz, and they were still able to make Spencer Rattler hold on to the ball too long, allowing that pressure to get home, which was very good. I think in this game against Bryce Young, who has been named the starter for the Panthers this week following Andy Dalton's car accident, very glad Andy Dalton's okay. I think against Bryce Young, though, the Broncos might go back to their man coverage blitzing tendencies because Pat Surtain is going to be back, and also because Bryce Young struggles against those types of defenses. We'll talk about that more in this game preview video. But for the Carolina Panthers, they're currently sitting at 1-6, one of the worst teams in the NFL. They've struggled both offensively and defensively. I'm really surprised, especially with their defensive struggles with defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero. I think that he's obviously a guy who has had some success before in the NFL here in Denver as their defensive coordinator, but it now seems like Evero, especially with the depleted personnel that he has on the defensive side of the ball, is kind of flaming out a little bit in Carolina, and it's a real shame because he had a really bright future, and I still think he has a bright future. It's just going to Carolina might not have been the best move for him long term. But this Panthers team has been surrounded with nothing but turmoil ever since David Tepper took over as their owner in 2019. David Tepper is one of the worst owners in all of sports. Both the Carolina Panthers and Charlotte FC have significant problems. The Panthers have had 7 head coaches, including interim, ever since David Tepper took over as the owner in 2019. That obviously signals that Tepper is very impatient and that he's quick to hire, but he's also quick to fire. And it's definitely a very, very frustrating process of what has been going on in Carolina these past few years. They traded away all those assets to get Bryce Young. They still ended up with the worst record in the league last year. Bryce Young has shown very little in his development. They decided to bench him just 3 games into the year in favor of Andy Dalton. Dalton had that one positive showing against the Las Vegas Raiders in his debut, and then after that has kind of reverted back to the old Andy Dalton. And then this week, obviously, he gets into that very scary car accident. Again, I'm very glad that him and his family and everyone involved, the dog as well, I'm glad everybody's okay. But Now it thrusts Bryce Young back into the starting lineup with Andy Dalton spraining his thumb in that car accident. And this is probably the worst game that you could have thrown Bryce Young back into. I was actually a proponent of putting Bryce Young back into the starting lineup for the Carolina Panthers because you don't have much to benefit at this point, sitting at 1-6 with Andy Dalton as your starting quarterback moving forward. But by that same token, I was also thinking they would probably wait another week to do it because they wouldn't necessarily want to throw Bryce Young out there against one of the most blitz-happy teams in the NFL in the Denver Broncos that has a top defense in almost every single metric. They will get after you. They will be aggressive. They will get in your face. They will confuse you up front. And it's just not a good matchup on paper for Bryce Young to have to go up against in his first start. But before we talk about that, guys, I want to jump into just this overall state of this Panthers roster. If you guys are unfamiliar with how we do these game preview videos, we go through the roster of the opponent and we break down their strengths, their weaknesses, where they could potentially attack the Broncos, and in turn, how the Broncos could exploit some of their overall weaknesses. So let's go ahead and bring in the roster, courtesy of our favorite website, Ourlads. But before we really break things down here, I want to give you some numbers that kind of give you a picture of how much the Panthers are really struggling, especially on this defensive side of the ball. And it does not help that their two best defenders that they have in Shaq Thompson at linebacker and Derek Brown at defensive tackle, those guys are both out for the season. So that does not help things at all for this Panthers team. But still, they are inexcusably bad right now. We'll start off with the passing defense for the Carolina Panthers. They have allowed 1,598 yards through the air, which is 22nd in the NFL. That's not too bad, but it only gets worse from here. 14 passing touchdowns allowed, which is 30th in the NFL. A 111.8 passer rating, which is 31st. They've only got 7 sacks this year, so they've really struggled to generate pressure. A lot of that is due to depleted personnel. That's 31st in the NFL. Rushing is even worse. Their rush defense is god-awful. 1,135 rushing yards allowed, which is 32nd in the NFL. 4.7 average yards per carry allowed, 24th. 13 rush touchdowns, 32nd. 66 rushing first downs allowed, 32nd. Really, really bad. And it's allowed their opponents to just rack up the score, basically. Their points allowed in the last 5 weeks: 40 versus Washington, primarily quarterbacked by Marcus Mariota; 38 versus Atlanta; 36 versus Chicago; 34 versus Cincinnati. They did have a bit of a bounce back against Las Vegas, though, in the first game of Andy Dalton being back. Their defense actually did play well. It was 22 points allowed. That was the lowest of the year, but they also allowed 47 total points in week 1 versus New Orleans. This defense has been putrid. And again, a lot of that I feel is more due to a depleted personnel, because we've seen Ejiro Evero have success with his scheme here in Denver. So this Panthers team, and we'll go through that in just a second, they're just completely beat to hell. I've also got some numbers on Bryce Young here that will kind of give you more of an indication as to some of these struggles that Young has had and why he is struggling so much. In terms of completion percentage, 56.9. Obviously, anytime you have a sub 60 completion percentage, that's not good. That's just on this season. These are all stats on this season. 299 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions in 2 starts, and then a few mop-up duty games here and there. But still, Bryce Young has had no production this year. A 28.9 success rate, which is 40th out of 40 eligible quarterbacks with a minimum of 50 snaps this year. A minus 11.3 completion percentage over expected, which is 39th out of 40 eligible quarterbacks, again with minimum of 50 snaps. A 9.9 ESPN quarterback rating, 40th out of 40 eligible quarterbacks in EPA per play. the last time we saw Bryce Young in a full start, he went 18 for 26 through the air. So you'd say, okay, that's not too bad, but it was for only 84 yards, 3.2 yards per attempt, no touchdowns, 1 interception. We talked about how the Broncos need to blitz in this game, and a main reason for that is Bryce Young's struggles. His struggles under pressure in general with a four-man rush is 5 for 15 for 87 yards this year, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and when blitzed, i.e. more than 4 rushers, 9 for 16, 80 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. Just really, really bad, man. This Panthers team is completely depleted. And I know I keep pushing this off, but before we get into this roster one more time, I also want to go through the injuries here for the Carolina Panthers, because that's another big factor that's really going to deplete this team. They have multiple players listed as out: wide receiver Deontay Johnson, safety Nick Scott, safety Jordan Fuller, wide receiver Adam Thielen, so your 2 top wide receivers and 2 of your top safeties, Jamie Robinson, another safety, edge rusher DJ Wanham, 3 players listed as doubtful, and Andy Dalton with his thumb injury. The only reason he's listed as doubtful and not out is because they want him to be active as the emergency quarterback in this game. Dane Jackson, another one of their starting corners, and then Jonathan Brooks, their rookie running back. He's not quite ready to go from his ACL tear. And then they've got another laundry list of players listed as questionable. I think most of these guys are in line to play, but it's still something to monitor for sure heading into this game. Defensive end Ashawn Robinson, linebacker Claudin Sherrillis, former Broncos linebacker Josie Jewell. You know Josie's going to do everything he can to play. Both their starting right tackle and their backup right tackle in Taylor Moton and Yosh Nijman. I think one of, if not both of those guys are going to be available for this game, but still something to monitor. Tommy Trimble, their starting tight end. Jadeveon Clowney, their starting edge rusher. Defensive tackle Jaden Crumedy, and safety Sam Franklin. So a lot of injuries for this Panthers team, which is also going to significantly impact the outcome of this game. Starting off with this wide receiver position here, those injuries are definitely going to rear their ugly head with Deontay Johnson being out. Adam Thielen, he's also not quite ready to go as he returns from a hamstring injury that he suffered in that Raiders game. And so now they're going to be starting their rookie first-round pick, Xavier Legat, Jalen Coker, an undrafted free agent who's actually made a few nice plays for them, David Moore, who's had stints all over the NFL, Seattle, here in Denver, Tampa Bay, couple separate stints in Carolina, Jonathan Mingo as well. So, yeah, man, definitely not great. When you look at their practice squad, they might elevate a guy like Devin Tompkins, the former Tampa Bay Buccaneer, Praise Olatoke, maybe Dan Chesina, Jordan Matthews. He's also been a wide receiver before in the NFL. Yes, it's that Jordan Matthews. He's still kicking around in the NFL. But their wide receiving core is completely depleted right now. And they're going to be depending on guys like Legat, Mingo, Coker, and David Moore to step up and make big-time plays for them. And it's not going to be easy for Bryce Young having to go out there with a depleted receiving core. And additionally, their offensive line this year has been a bit of a mess. They did spend some money to go out and try to address it with Robert Hunt out from the Miami Dolphins, as well as Damian Lewis from the Seattle Seahawks. They spent some money to bring those guys in, but they lost their starting center, Austin Corbett, for the season. That was a big blow to their line. Corbett was one of their best offensive linemen. Ike Ekwonu, former first-round pick at left tackle. He's been kind of hot and cold in his career. The Lewis and Hunt signings, I mean, they've been decent signings for sure, but like, you're always going to kind of get what you're paying for on the free agent market when you're paying a guard. I think that you're going to get decent play, but you're not going to get like the highest level of play in the world. There's a reason why the original teams of these respective players did not feel it was necessary to re-sign them, and they allowed them to hit the open market. They've got Brady Christensen in there at center now. We'll have to see how things fare with him, with Austin Corbett now out for the season. Again, that was a huge blow. And we already talked about the issues that they have at right tackle with injuries, with Taylor Moton, who's a really good solid player when he's healthy, and then Josh Nijman, who came over from Green Bay a couple of years ago. We'll have to see how that shakes out there, if Moton's able to go. If not, is Josh Nijman able to go? We'll have to see what happens there. But this Panthers offensive line has definitely had their issues this year, no matter who the quarterback is, Andy Dalton or Bryce Young. But Young does have a tendency to hold on to the ball too long and take bad sacks. Broncos country is familiar with that type of quarterback play from their previous seasons. So that's something that has definitely made this offensive line look worse than they are on paper, but it's still by no means a top-tier unit in the NFL. At tight end, we talked about Tommy Tremble being questionable in this game. I think he's going to try to go. Jatavian Sanders, he's their fourth-round rookie out of Texas this year. I think they want to get him more and more incorporated into this offense as the season goes forward. Ian Thomas, their blocking tight end, he's been there forever, since 2018, former fourth-round pick. And then Felipe Franks, he's a former quarterback converted to tight end, spent some time with the Atlanta Falcons. He's now here in Carolina as well. We talked about the quarterback position. Bryce Young is set to start. Andy Dalton, he's listed as doubtful. He's not full-blown listed as out. That way he can dress. I think he's probably going to be in uniform as the emergency third quarterback as he deals with this thumb sprain. Wouldn't be surprised at all if Jack Plummer ends up being the actual direct backup quarterback to Bryce Young tomorrow for this game. Their run game is probably the best asset that they have on this offense. Chuba Hubbard's really good. He's produced really highly for them this year. Miles Sanders is decent. And then Raheem Blackshear, he's a speed merchant. He can give you an explosive play here or there. So I think this run game's probably the best thing that this offense has going for them right now. And it's something that they're going to lean heavily on in this game. But unfortunately for Carolina, Denver's got a really good run defense with guys like Zach Allen, DJ Jones, Malcolm Roach, John Franklin Myers up front. All of those guys are going to make it really difficult for the Panthers to run the ball. They're going to play tight to the line of scrimmage and basically force Bryce Young to beat them through the air. And to this point, Young has not showcased the ability to do that. And I think it's going to be really difficult for him coming off of all these weeks of rest. And now he was told on a short notice that he's going to have to start this week. It's just not a great situation for Bryce Young. I legit feel bad for him because the Panthers have failed him on every single level. Although Bryce has shown a lot of deficiencies for being a former number one overall pick, I will say that the Panthers have done him literally zero favors in helping his development. It really is all about what situation you go to as a rookie quarterback in the NFL. And Bryce Young easily went to the worst situation that he could have possibly gone to in the Carolina Panthers. So I feel really bad for Bryce having to be reinserted into the lineup against this high level of opponent on defense. It's got a chance to get ugly, and by no means am I overlooking the Carolina Panthers as an opponent. They are still an NFL team. All these guys get paid professionally to play football too. They could win any given Sunday. It's that old adage of any given time you take the field, you have a chance to win. This Panthers team, though, has shown almost no signs of scrappiness. That one game that they had where they showed signs of positivity was that Raiders game, and we know now the quality of opponent that the Raiders are. So it's just tough, man. I'm trying to give this Panthers team some credit here and trying to at least showcase where they could do some good things, but it's just hard when you haven't put good tape out there. Your numbers are showing that you're one of the worst teams in football. It's just hard to find anything good about that. It's kind of like putting lipstick on a pig. This Panthers team is not good. There's no beating around the bush. And now we got to break down the defensive side of the ball where it's even worse, quite frankly. I mean, you look at their run defense where they're at the bottom of the barrel in almost every statistical category. And yes, a big reason for that is because Derek Brown, their all-pro defensive tackle, he's out for the season. That's a huge, massive blow to this Panthers run defense. But still, they are towards the bottom of the barrel. A'Shawn Robinson listed as questionable for this game, so we'll see if he even plays, quite frankly. That's going to be something to monitor. He's probably one of the best players they have on this defensive interior. Him and probably Shy Tuttle. I think Tuttle's also an okay player. But when you have a guy named LeBron Ray starting for you, things aren't going well for you. I feel like Ray is definitely one of those weak points on your defensive line. I've seen a little bit of his tape, and I'm just not all that impressed. I could be completely wrong here with LeBron Ray. I will be admitting that I haven't seen a whole lot of his tape, but again, man, he just, for what little I have seen, has not impressed me that much. I'm very concerned about that particular position right there, right defensive end. I've seen them rotate Deshaun Williams in a little bit. Former Bronco, that could be an option for them. Jonathan Harris, another former Bronco who was a turnstile on the defensive line last year. And then Nick Thurman, who is halfway decent. So, again, this Panthers defensive line is just really slim pickings right now. They're starting a lot of lower end players in the NFL, and it's just really, really tough to overcome stuff like that. At edge rusher, yes, they technically do have two former first round picks in Jadeveon Clowney and Charles Harris, but given the fact that they only have 7 sacks on the season, they still haven't gotten much production there. You've got DJ Johnson, Jacob Windman, Thomas Incoom, the former Bronco who was in Denver for training camp this past year and also was on the roster last year. He's now in Carolina. And then Cam Gill, he came over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, yeah, man, they have not gotten much production out of this edge rush unit despite having at least one household name in Jadeveon Clowney and a guy who's a former first-round pick in Charles Harris. Their linebacking core took a significant hit with Shaq Thompson out for the season. So Josie Jewell, he's had to step into an even bigger role than anticipated when he signed with Carolina from Denver, going over there and reuniting with Ajero Evero, as well as Dom Capers and a couple of other members of that defensive staff. Trevin Wallace has also had to step in. We'll see if Josie's going to be able to go in this game. I think that he's going to do everything he can, like I said earlier, because this is his former team. He wants to go out there and showcase that it was a mistake to let him walk, although the Broncos have gotten high-level production from their linebacking room since they let him walk, so I really do think it was the right move long-term for this team. They've also got John Radigan, who's bounced around the league a little bit, most notably with the Seattle Seahawks, and then Claudin Sherlis, who, yeah, he's listed as questionable for this game. So, again, it's just really tough. They're depleted personnel-wise defensively right now. Their secondary has some good pieces. J.C. Horn looks like the injuries are finally behind him. They traded for Mike Jackson from the Seattle Seahawks. He's given them some decent play at corner. Shaw Smith-Wade at nickel. He's played well as well. Jamie Robinson, he's injured. Sam Franklin, he is also injured. He might be able to go in this one. Dane Jackson, he's hurt. So it's just really tough. And then they've got Caleb Farley there. He's the former first-round pick from the Tennessee Titans. So, yeah, they've got a couple of guys there from that draft class. So, yeah, man, it's definitely just tough when you have all these injuries. But their secondary, they've at least gotten some decent production out of a couple of guys. But it's just overall been tough when you have the 22nd in passing yards allowed, 30th in passing touchdowns allowed, 31st in passer rating allowed, 7th in sacks. Man, this defense has just been tough. You haven't produced from a pass defense perspective, and from a run defense perspective, you've arguably been worse than the New Orleans Saints right now. I hope they go out there and they're at least able to compete with this Broncos team, but right now, this Broncos team on paper should steamroll this team. And I know that previously the Broncos have had favorable matchups like this and they've failed to take advantage, and they've ultimately end up losing these. They'd ultimately end up losing this matchup. But I think that right now the Broncos just favor the Carolina Panthers in almost every single category, from coaching to offense to defense. This should be a game where Bo Nix is able to get his feet right and is able to generate more of a passing attack. This should be a game where the Broncos could easily rush for 200 yards just like they did last week and just like Washington did last week against this Panthers defense. This should be a game where Bryce Young should really struggle against this defense. This should be a game where the Panthers shouldn't be able to generate much on offense. But when you look at games like the Chargers game this year, where it looks like the Broncos just got out coached, also Justin Herbert played really well, and they kind of got their morale taken out of them when Pat Surtain went down. You look at the New England game last year, where Sean Payton will be the first one to tell you that he got out coached by Bill Belichick in that game. It's just really hard to see in what area this Panthers team outdoes the Broncos. There's no real area that you could lean on and say, okay, there's this that the Panthers can lean on, and that's what could propel them to victory. I just don't see it. If the Broncos are to be taken seriously this year as a playoff contender, then they should steamroll the Carolina Panthers. This shouldn't be close. The Broncos should take care of their business in this game, and if they can't do it, then I'm not going to be able to take this team seriously this year as a playoff contender. So I have the Denver Broncos winning in very convincing fashion, 34-10. I think that the Broncos are going to roll. If they don't, then we can't take this team seriously moving forward. All right, Broncos country, I am curious, what is your final score prediction for this game? Do you think the Broncos are going to be able to roll in this one, or do you think that Carolina is going to go out there, give a scrappy performance, and give this Broncos team fits and possibly upset them in this Super Bowl 50 rematch? Drop those comments down below, guys. I would love to hear your thoughts as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video, as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are both free and easy ways to show your support. Helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and it helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, I am your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.